All right, welcome back. It's Tilly Storm, and today we're going to be talking about building an audience for your podcast from the time that you launch and beyond. Everyone wants more listeners, right? Well, it doesn't matter if you're just launching or looking to grow your existing show, because the tips I'm going to give you today are going to help you attract and retain your target audience and your ideal customers. So the first tip that I have is just to create very high quality content. The foundation of building an audience for your podcast is literally just that. If people don't like your content, if it's really low quality, they're not going to listen. So just create high quality content that your listeners will want to come back for. So what makes your podcast content high quality versus low quality? Okay, there are three things. The first is a great sound setup and lighting if you're going to use video too. The second is professional editing. And the third is content that's relevant for your target audience and your ideal client, which should really just be the same thing. Now, I've made this mistake when I first started my podcast back in 2017, but I literally had no idea what I was doing. And it also didn't seem to matter because my podcast was growing a lot very quickly, simply because the content was super amazing. However, I didn't even own a podcast microphone until episode number 91. Oh, so while I got away with not having good audio quality, I also think of how much better my podcast could be doing had I started off with a great setup and professional editing. So before you launch, be sure to set up your space for optimal sound quality. Hire a professional editor, such as the ones on our team here at Starseed Productions, and be sure that your content is clear, concise, and catered to your target audience and your ideal client. Okay. So let's talk about poor quality content. Well, this means that your content is all over the place. People aren't really sure if it even fits in with the premise of your podcast. Maybe the audio quality is terrible. There's no actionable items or key takeaways because you simply get off track and you talk about anything and everything for the entire episode. Oh my God, no one's going to listen to the entire episode if you're all over the place and there's no clear step one, step two. These are the 4 tips, that sort of thing. Okay, so tip number 2 is to promote your show on social media correctly. All right, if you haven't launched yet, there is a different strategy for promoting your show. So when you're in pre-launch mode, you're going to want to build up a lot of hype and anticipation on your social media channels to get people excited about it. Okay, you can post teasers, things like I've got something really big coming up, and just building in some mystery for your audience, right? So basically, if you think of it like a hot date, the more that you plan it and anticipate the date's arrival, usually the hotter the main event is going to be. Well, it is the same concept here. Now, if you're in post-launch mode, then you want to make sure that you're promoting your show on social media correctly. Okay, what does correctly mean? Well, the wrong way to promote your show on social media is by posting audiograms and post with a call to action to simply get people to go listen to your new episode. FYI, no one on social media cares about your new podcast episode. Simple as that. If they did, they'd be in their podcast app listening to your new episode right now instead of scrolling social media. The truth is, your effort to get people off of one app and onto another is really a helpless cause. Okay, audiograms and reels to promote your show are simply not enough to get your target audience off of social media and into their podcast apps. The conversion rate for that is seriously a fraction of a percentage. It's less than 1% of people who see your post about your podcast episode are actually going to go listen to it. So why are you wasting your time promoting your show by posting about it and telling people to go listen to it when it doesn't work? Okay. So the correct way to promote your show on social media is to, number 1, to discover certain hashtags if you're on Instagram or Twitter, or groups on Facebook or Reddit that your target audience is using. And then number 2, you're going to go be social on social media. Okay. That means that you are actually building a relationship with people, commenting on other people's posts about the topic you're an expert in, and then provide them real value. You can lead them to one of your podcast episodes that answers a question that they have because it's actually something they're looking for a solution to right now. When people have a pressing issue or concern that they want resolved, they're more likely to get off of the social media and go listen to the podcast. But by targeting and engaging with people on social media who actively need what you have, you're much more likely to bring in new listeners to your show than if you're spending all that time making reels and posts for hardly anyone to convert to new podcast listeners because they aren't hot leads. They're not actively searching for what you are offering. Okay, so tip number 3 is, if appropriate, you build a community for your audience. Okay, now you guys are already familiar with how I'm a holistic sex and intimacy coach for millionaires. So you can imagine that building a community for my listeners for that business is not likely going to happen. So as long as your podcast topic isn't a taboo topic like mine, or it's not about mental health or something that people just don't want to air their dirty laundry out, then it's really important to build a community for your audience. And that's most of you listening out there. Most of you aren't going to have a taboo audience. So you could do this in an app like Circle or Mighty Networks. Or if your target audience is over 40, you could start a Facebook group, but I really would suggest that you stay away from building an audience on Facebook these days, because less and less people are on the platform every day, and the younger generation is not on Facebook at all. So unless your audience is boomers and you know that they're on Facebook, that would be the only reason that I would suggest starting a Facebook group. So once you've determined where to build your community, then you're going to make an effort to build a relationship with them so they stay engaged and keep coming back for more. Okay, respond to comments, answer their questions, involve them in the content by creating polls or asking for feedback. If you're just launching, you can move people from your social media platforms into your community by posting and building hype about your podcast launch on your current social media platforms. So building hype around your launch is one of the keys to an epic launch that will result in growing your customer base sooner rather than later. Okay, tip number 4 is to collaborate with other B-list podcasters willing to promote your show to their audience. Collaborating with other podcasters in your niche can help you reach new listeners. Okay, so if you use Listen Notes, you can easily identify at least 20 podcasters in the top 5 to 1.5% with a similar but not an identical niche to help you launch your podcast by agreeing to be a launch partner. So ideally, you'll want anywhere from like 6 to 10 launch partners for your podcast launch. You want your launch partners ideally to be podcasters too, because it's likely that their audience is already full of people who listen to podcasts. So you can also use launch partners that don't have a podcast, but you're probably not going to see as big of an uptick in listeners from an audience that aren't already podcast listeners themselves. All right. So while everyone still wants to get the big name, right? They want to get the big person and the expert in their field. Just know that it's very unlikely that any big name is going to properly promote your launch to their audience. Okay, so if you get a big name to agree to be a launch partner and promote your show, that's amazing. Good job. But you'll probably get more yeses from B-list people who may not have that big of a following, but they're big enough to bring in the right people to your show. So making a big deal about your podcast launch or relaunch and building up a lot of hype around it will help you get a lot of new listeners real quickly. Okay, tip 5 is that consistency is key. I know you've heard it before. Finally, it's just important to really hammer that one in. Be consistent. Deliver high quality content regularly, whether you release weekly episodes, bi-weekly, or monthly. Just make sure you're staying true to your schedule and giving your listeners a reason to tune in. All right, so those are my top 5 tips on building an audience for your podcast. Remember, building an audience, it takes time and it takes a lot of effort, but with hard work and dedication, you'll be well on your way to growing a loyal and engaged audience, whether you're about to launch or possibly relaunch. And if you want support with building an audience for your launch or simply want to grow your podcast listener base, we are here to help. You can check out the link below this video and book a call with us to discuss. Thanks so much for joining.